Hello, everybody, and I do not have it switched over to me. Let's try that. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 54, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about just places we'd like to visit, ideas we've had for where we could go, where we'd really like to go, kind of our wish list of places we would like to attempt doing some bushcraft work. And I mean, this is, I think, anyway, my 2 cents on it is this is kind of inspired by realizing that we have listeners from all over the globe, and we got chatting about, oh, I wonder what it's like here, and I wonder what it's like there, and that conversation just kind of continued on, and here we are.
No, I mean, and that's exactly what happened. We were discussing what to talk about, and I mean, we have a lot of subjects we could talk about that are bushcraft related, but we kind of wanted something a little bit different. And a lot of the trips we do now, I mean, they're Atlantic Canada based, for sure. I don't know if either of us have really done much camping outside of Atlantic Canada. Um,
Not
I
as
did.
much as I would like.
No, me neither. I spent a little bit of time up in the prairies, not so much camping. I did get to do a bit of bushcraft stuff up there. But for the most part, I've spent a lot of my time here in Atlantic Canada. But we meet and talk to people from around the world on different sites and places I frequent. You often end up talking to people who are all the way around the world. And some of the things they talk about and they show are just, in my opinion, amazing. And that's kind of the spur of all this is like, where would you go if you could go anywhere in the world and see any environment and get to camp there and see what it has to offer? Where would you go? I mean, there's so many beautiful places to see, so much wildlife we could interact with. There's old historic places you could see. I mean, the list for me is almost endless. And yeah, I could drone on about that forever. But so we were going to talk about where would we go. One of the places I kind of had mentioned just before the show was Australia. It's pretty well clean around the world, and their wildlife is about as different from here as you get. Um,
And not only is it different, there's just, well, I guess, yeah, it's different, but there's such a diversity of wildlife in
yeah,
Australia. You know what I mean? Like in Canada, relatively speaking, our wildlife is not near as diverse as it is in Australia because they have that extreme, well, I shouldn't say extreme, but they have their own diversity of climates, and therefore they allow for the wildlife to kind of go with the diversity of the climate. Just before, we were talking about how the northern Australia is around the equator. It's pretty hot, a lot of deserts and stuff like that. But if you go south to like the bottom of Australia there, and I can't remember any of the city names there, and I should, but anyway, they get weather very similar to us. So you get a winter, you get some snow, you have all the stuff that kind of goes with that kind of climate.
yeah. I just see someone pointed out that Woodland Caribou Park in Ontario is Gary's dream trip. Uh, and not so much that one. I haven't really checked that park out, but I've often thought about the Algonquin Park here in Ontario.
Mm.
Grew up very close to that, and they talk about trips, and you can do 3-4 day trips across that, no problem, in canoe and stuff. So yeah, tons of places within Canada. The list is pretty big. I probably my first experience with a podcast was a couple of young guys from, I think it was Michigan, who went all the way from their hometown to Hudson Bay, up through the rivers. They went up through basically the Red River up through Winnipeg and right on up through Winnipeg Lake, right up through the little tributaries and rivers and stuff until they made it to Hudson Bay. It was following some other explorer from many, many years before. And that sounds like an awesome trip. I mean, this took them the better part of the summer to do. And I would love to try some kind of trip like that. So you were telling us, though, or we talked very briefly, where was your place you really wanted to see?
So much like yourself, I had a list that was as long as I am. Like it's I would love to go everywhere and try bushcrafting everywhere as well. Just camping, I guess. Not even bushcrafting, just camping. But if I had to narrow it down to one place, and just as I told you before the show, it would be Iceland. And I think it's just because I've always had a fascination with Iceland since I was a kid. It was always someplace I wanted to visit. It's been my like coveted vacation spot on a pedestal. And I guess the bushcrafting thing to go camping there would be great too. You had mentioned that it's very heavily regulated for camping and stuff like that. So this, of course, taking in mind that if I was given free reign to go do what I wanted, like I could get dropped off in Iceland and just walk into the woods and go camping, that's what I would love to do. I realize that's, realistically not possible. One, I can't afford to go to Iceland, and two, the camping is regulated, like you had mentioned before the show. But if I could just be dropped anywhere, go camping, definitely Iceland. I think the landscape is just amazing over. Well, I think the landscape is amazing over there, based on talking to people, seeing pictures, and stuff like that. And I guess a close second to that for me would be Ireland, for much the same reason, just to see the natural landscapes and I always liked cliff camping, and Ireland has a lot of cliffs and stuff like that, and I thought it'd be real neat to get out there and see that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I share that one for like Ireland. I'd love to get to Ireland, Scotland,
Mm.
and right up through pretty well almost anything north of that seems really interesting to me. So you got your Sweden and Switzerland and all these countries up there.
Oh,
Uh,
Switzerland would be nice. I never even thought about that.
Germany. I mean, the opportunities for bushcrafting and backwoods camping around the world are mind-boggling, and the things you can see, the river systems, the lakes, the wildlife, the other environmental things, like you said, the cliffs and stuff. You can kind of get a feel for that kind of stuff. They're either in Grossmoor, Newfoundland, or even the Highlands here in Nova
Mm.
Scotia. You get some amazing views and stuff. But again, where a lot of this is national parks and stuff, you are somewhat limited in what you can and cannot do in a lot of these places. And I think around the world, if you had to go, if you chose to go anywhere, you really do have to do your research and find out what can you do, what can't you do, what are you allowed to use, what aren't you allowed to use. So it's a lot to a long trip like that. Me and my wife last fall, we were looking about potentially going south. We looked at Dominican Republic.
Mm.
And they have some national parks and stuff that apparently you can camp in. And I mean, that'd be a much more tropical environment, totally different than anything I've ever attempted before.
But even that would be neat. All the places minus Australia we've listed so far,
Hmm.
foliage and stuff like that, still fairly similar to our own.
Yeah. And, by no means do I feel limited in that type of environment. I mean, if you looked at Russia, I think Russia would be very similar to Canada in a lot of ways,
Mm.
at least in videos and stuff I've seen. Uh, I watched a documentary, I think it was Happy People of Tangier or something it was called. Uh,
Sure.
any, Anyways, it's a group, a small community in Russia that still lives by hunting and trapping and a little bit of wood harvesting. Uh, and it's really interesting. Very isolated communities, still kind of tribe-like settings, and they have like a boat that comes up the river. I think it's called maybe not Tangier, but yeah, the boat comes up that one river system a couple times a year and does the trading and stuff, and that's where most of their income comes from and most of their supplies. And the rest of the year, they more or less live off the land. It's very, very neat. It's not something that I kind of thought still existed in that type of part of the world, but it does.
That would be that'd be an awesome experience all on its own. Just to kind of, I know here in North America we get. I'm trying to think of the word. There's actually a specific word for it, and I can't remember what it's called. But people that hobby living the old methodology, and like they'll go out in canvas tarps and period clothing and stuff like that. Sam, I can't pronounce his
Wenzel.
what. whatever you just said. I can't pronounce it. For some reason, my tongue will not allow me to say his last name. Sorry, Sam. But anyway, Sam,
Hey, your last one.
I know, it's weird, right? But he partakes in some of this, and it's really neat to watch. I would love to go to a location that does that exclusively year round, much like what you were talking about, and experience that for a longer period of time than just a few days or something like that. Like actually try and hunker down and live the lifestyle for maybe a couple weeks or something would be a really neat idea, I think, as well. And there's places like that here in North America. We do it in Canada. There's people in Nova Scotia, as I mentioned. Sam does this. There's a group there. So I don't think that's really unobtainable either. So realistically,
No,
that would be a great one to do.
it exists down in the States too. I know that it's fairly popular in the States. A lot of it's centered around more like the Civil War and stuff, like people that reenact a lot of that. But they try to live and dress and act in time period. And we have not so much camping style, but there are a couple of small communities around Nova Scotia that for a short period of time anyways, the people try to live that way to represent for tourism and stuff, right? I remember there was one I seen, we visited a little French community out towards, I want to say Yarmouth way. And out Lewisburg?
Lewisburg is towards Bridgewater.
No, that's Lewisburg. Lewisburg is out towards North
Lewisburg,
Sydney.
yeah. Sorry, the other way.
Yeah.
Lunenburg, Lewisburg. Gotcha.
They have that part, or that national park, or whatever it is, a historic site. They have people
Lewisburg
dressed.
Fortress, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've actually been there.
yeah. So I know you can. I haven't been there. Apparently, they don't allow dogs.
No. And they're
So
against the color red as well. Found that out.
so, anyways, yeah. We when we camp, we generally take our dogs, and so we were very restricted on where we could go. So when we showed up, they basically told us to keep going, and there was no real options for us. So I haven't been there, but friends and family went there and have told me all about it. So, different things, different places, but no, we were talking, and I guess we'll try to get back on topic. Just what's the allure of going away from home? Because a lot of the camping we watch, a lot of the people we talk to, we camp the same general areas over and over again because they're accessible. They're we know what we can do, so we're comfortable with it. We know where we can park. We know all the rules and regulations. We know that no one's going to harass us really for this. But I love seeing new places. When we camped with our camper, we hardly ever camped in the same park twice. We always look for a new park or a new location. And now that I'm doing a lot more of the backwoods camping again, I'm always looking for a new place to hit, a new campsite or a new lake or a new river or a new physical location. And as I'm hitting more and more places here in Nova Scotia, and more I think about, what could I hit that's even further away? Can I find big waterfalls, or can I find, amazing scenery or different wildlife, or just experiences that are new and fresh to me? Because that's what drives me for a lot of this, is learning and doing new things.
I completely agree with you, and much along the same line there. I kind of got spoiled when I used to work with natural resources. We used to do things called PGIs, or pellet group inventories. I know you and I have talked about it before. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the show or not. And that kind of spoiled me in Nova Scotia, because between where I worked, which was Halifax East, so I got to do and explore a lot of like the Sheet Harbour and surrounding areas, the Musquodoboit Harbour and surrounding areas, Middle Musquodoboit and surrounding areas, and all the way to Cape Breton, because there's a moose PGI that gets done there too. And you're flown in by helicopter, you're dropped off, and you do your PGI and you get picked up later. But regardless, I kind of got spoiled because I got to go to all these different places and see the woods. I only camped very infrequently, once, maybe twice in Cape Breton when I was doing moose PGIs, just because fog rolled in. But other than that, I just kind of barreled through the woods, didn't really appreciate it as much as I should have at the time. And like you said, now that I'm getting back to the camping and stuff like that, I'm rethinking of all these places I went, and I can remember neat things, but I can't remember where they were. So I
Yeah.
got spoiled, but it kind of sucks because now I'd really like to go back and find some of these places because I can remember one place and it's somewhere towards Sheet Harbor. And I can't remember where, but it's somewhere up and around Sheet Harbor. It might be down like the old 336, I think is the highway down there, towards Abraham Lake or something like that, is what's in my mind. Anyway, it's like this big open area that's kind of on a cliffy style terrain, but it's just full of like coyote and bear dens and stuff like that. Most of them empty, of course. Like these are old dens, but it's just the most amazing place that I can remember being in Nova Scotia. And for the life of me, I can't remember where it's at. But if I could find that place, all that stuff aside, I would still love to go out there and like stay because I think it would be really, really neat. Because it's big and
Yeah.
open, so you're gonna see something coming after you from like a good long ways away. I'm not worried about the animals at all, but it was just such an enchanting place in Nova Scotia. And like I said, at the time, I was like, oh, this is neat. Went on about my day and never thought about it again. And now I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I wish I had remembered that. And I'm learning more and more that you need to appreciate where you're at in the moment because it disappears really quick. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
like, I'm not trying to be philosophical or anything like that, but it's literally a realization. And so yeah, there's tons of places in Nova Scotia that I would love to relive and go camping and just check out and explore because Nova Scotia's not a big province, but there is tons of places people don't go frequently, and there's tons of places I've never set foot on. And I'm sure you're much the
No.
same. Like you're native to Newfoundland, and you kind of came over to here, and so much the same. Like in Newfoundland, where you're from, bigger province, so of course, but there's probably tons of areas you've never seen, but would love
Oh
to.
yeah. I've seen maybe 1% of the whole province, maybe. I mean, that's stretching it. That's rounding up for sure. But the parts that I have seen, the parts that I explored, I mean, it's some gorgeous landscape. It's some beautiful rivers, clean, clear, generally rocky. Not so much like a lot of the runs around here are fairly muddy. Um, the terrain is more abrupt, so it's a lot. I find it hillier, rockier. You know, your transitions are much greater. And in the wildlife, I mean, there's more moose and caribou over there. There's not a lot here in this province, but there's no porcupines, no skunks, no snakes. So
No
there's definitely a
snakes?
difference. Um, no,
No
none,
skunks, no
none.
porcupine. I did not know this about Newfoundland. That's an interesting thing
Oh
for me
no,
right there.
yeah, no. It's fairly different in the animals you see over there. Not so much in the greater variety. In fact, it's a much smaller variety. Except, like I said, I mean, we have caribou, which you don't see in Nova Scotia at all. I
No.
think someone said they used to be here at one point, but they haven't been. But there was moose here on the mainland, and
Yep.
moose were never in Newfoundland until they were brought over. There was also wolves in Newfoundland at one point, but they're not there now. But since I left, there were the odd one before I left, but there's coyotes over there now, and they say those appear to have been bred with wolves at some point, so they're bigger and stuff. So yeah, I mean, even here in Atlantic Canada, you see quite a diversity depending on the province and area you go to. Um,
Even New Brunswick, our closest neighbors, there's
yeah,
already a difference in wildlife and surroundings and stuff like that. So I mean, we really don't have to go far from home to start hitting places that well, at least I'd really love to visit. Like I'd love to go to New Brunswick, for instance, and find some wild turkeys because they now have wild turkeys, and to me that's amazing. Like a turkey to me is like this creature that's just white and you get it off a farm. These things don't run around
yeah,
naturally,
no,
but yeah, not just the animals, but I mean even the landscape changes a little bit because like the vegetation, the trees and stuff, the foliage, they have a lot more. What am I trying to think here? Like beech and jackpole pines and stuff like that. We got the odd ones floating around here, but you're not getting big amounts of them like you would over there. No, failed. Oh, they tried to bring them back in Cape Breton. So Nova Scotia caribou population is extinct, and the one attempt to trying to bring them back failed. And I assume that was in Cape Breton, which would make sense. Because Cape Breton is very similar topographically to Newfoundland.
Yeah.
So that
They,
would kind of make sense.
speaking of attempts to move animals into different provinces, they tried to put, I think it was buffalo in Newfoundland.
How'd that go?
It was generally a failure. They tended to walk off the cliffs, if I remember correctly. There's a whole documentary on it, and up until a few years ago, there was still one on a small island off the coast of Newfoundland. They
One
would go
lone
back to visit
buffalo.
one low buffalo or bison. I can't remember. It was one of the two. But yeah, they put a herd of them on there. They didn't last very long. They mostly died off. But it was an attempt to see if it could be brought in and if they'd survive. They didn't really. Um, but some attempts to bring animals into different environments succeed and some fail. Oftentimes, when they succeed, it's considered an ecological disaster. Australia, that we talked about earlier, I think rabbits and toads are two examples of animals they brought in to assist the environment and turned out to be an ecological disaster. The toads they brought in to get rid of some beetle. The toads ate pretty well everything but the beetle. And since there's no natural predators around, they just
Multiplied and ran.
And rabbits, well, they breed like rabbits.
Funny, the saying came from them.
Yeah.
So Gary said the moose in Cape Breton are not native either. Mainland moose are native to Nova Scotia. And we do still have a few mainland moose floating around. I had done some surveys with Natural Resources and we did find a few. They are a protected species, so anybody out there that's thinking, oh, moose hunting in Nova Scotia, don't go for it. They are a very aggressively protected species. And that's basically just signing your own goodbye ticket. But here in Australia, rabbits, toads, feral goats are all big problems here in Australia. I did not realize feral goats were a thing. I can't, like, when I think feral, I think very wild and aggressive, and I just can't imagine that with a goat. But I know it means just wild, but I get this picture of feral goat with, like, this goat with horns that's frothing at the mouth. But, yeah, because most of those were all introduced species, just as we were saying. Rabbits, toads, and I imagine goats were introduced over there. It doesn't seem like it would be the kind of climate to support a goat, naturally.
I don't think it's the climate. It's the problem. It's just that you think about the animals that are over there. The other animal that I think is over there that wasn't naturally there before was the camel.
Just said that. Camels, too, in some spots.
And what I've read is now, like, Saudi Arabia gets the majority of their camels from Australia. Like,
interesting.
That. And camels are a really interesting thing if you ever follow them. They believe that the camel actually originated in South America. And
I can see that.
It actually went up through North America, across the Siberia, and down in. And they were originally like a high altitude, cold weather creature. But the same adaptations that helped them survive in those environments also helped them survive in deserts. So their ability to walk on soft, like sandy soil or snow to preserve moisture and store fat worked well in a desert. So it's interesting that they pretty well don't exist around here anymore. And there's very little evidence of them in this area, but I guess when they do archaeological digs and stuff, you can find some remnants, and that would have been the path they took right up through, probably in through Tibet and stuff. And so it's a really long way for them to get to where they ended up. I think
there would be a great trip. You know what? Let's do the camel run. We'll go where they started, and we'll migrate. Like I just what you exactly said. Wouldn't that be a fun adventure? I mean, dream trips, there's a great one.
That is an awesome adventure. I am 100% up for it. All we need is sponsorship, and I will do it.
I will even bring my Camelback water container. That way, we're, you'd have to bring a Camelback, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, actually, sorry, go ahead.
No, just the other animal I was going to bring up earlier is hogs in Hawaii aren't natural there, and now it's the big huntings out there because they're pretty well aggressive. And I think hogs are pretty aggressive in a lot of areas. I know down in Texas, there's pretty well open hunts for them because they're such
Yeah,
a problem
farmers just
animal.
mow them down because they destroy farmlands.
Yep,
What was I
they
going to say?
export this Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Uh, Kind of half joking, not joking, onto the camel run there. I would love to actually do some visiting and attempt some camping in like a deserty area. Because I have never seen an actual desert, minus just like driving by it. I've never been
There's
out.
a desert.
Where?
I think it's west of Winnipeg.
But that would still be another, if I could do something and money and all that wasn't an option, I would love to do like a desert camp of some sort. I want somebody to go with me because I'm pretty sure if I just tried to solo a desert camp, I would not last. I'm not used to it. I know nothing about it. I would either get bitten by something I shouldn't be bitten by, eat something I shouldn't eat, or literally just freeze to death at night. But I think it would be fun to go out and just experience that kind of landscape. You know what I mean?
I probably have the same skill and knowledge about deserts as you do, but I would not hesitate to attempt it. And
Oh, I would
if,
attempt it. I'm just saying I know I probably wouldn't survive it because I got all the desert
I,
know-how of a polar bear.
but no, I agree with you. Desert would be very interesting. Jungle is something I've always been fascinated by. Sort of the opposite end of the desert, like the polar opposite. If there could be one. But all these different environments and landscapes, they enthrall me. They fascinate me.
I think an Arctic one would be, well, not quite Arctic, but like Yellowknife, Whitehorse, somewhere up around there, just colder weather. But that would be an interesting one to do. I know once upon a time on the Nova Scotia Bushcraft Facebook page there, before we ever even had this dream or anything like that, I remember somebody talking, they were putting together a small group of people that they wanted to try and do like a Arctic Circle expedition. Basically, they just wanted to hit the Arctic Circle and come back, which isn't all the
Yeah.
way to the North Pole. Of course, the Arctic Circle starts below that. And that would be a neat thing to do too, but there'd be a lot of planning involved in that just because of the cold weather, and you may only be able to get into certain spots at certain times of the year. And did you see that comment from Gary?
Yes, I did. I could try switching to the laptop and see if I get a better signal, but
Are you using
I don't
your
know how
lapel
easy.
mic, or are you just using the? Oh, okay.
The mic's there. I plugged it in, got the podcast active, but it's most likely a reception issue.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
Um. All right. We'll run with it for tonight because we're almost done anyway. But and the other thing I would like to try is Tropical Island Getaway. Like, you see it on a lot of the survival shows and stuff like that. They get dropped on a tropical island, and they're like, you know what? If somebody wasn't picking me up, I could stay here for a nice long time. It's paradise. I would love to try something like that. Like, go to a tropical island where nobody else is, and just try and set up shop,
Yeah.
providing there was fresh water, because I do know that is one of the biggest risks you run with tropical islands is potentially the lack of fresh water.
So you mentioned the Arctic Circle, and we started off early on. I was talking about one of the first podcasts I ever listened to, and it's called Adventure North, and it was two guys, Sean Bloomfield and Colton Whitty. They did 2,200 miles in 49 days from
Dang. Oh, they were boating, you said.
Casca, Minnesota to Hudson Bay, and they did it in 2016.
That'd be a good run. But
And they
that's
were
like Justin Barber there. He went across Newfoundland. Another great track
oh,
there.
yeah, and he's got on YouTube right now him going across Labrador.
Mm.
And I just the other day he posted that he was out I think for 35 days, encompassing most of February. So I think he probably left in January and came back early March. But he just posted a few days ago that he done another trek somewhere. I assume on the island. So I mean, he's very active and out there, and these are types of trips I'd love to attempt. I've never attempted a trip of that length, and the planning and support you need to set up to get that going is pretty monumental. I mean, like us, he's got he's got people that depend on him and family and stuff. So it's not easy to just drop everything and go for 3 or 4 months. I mean, me and you have discussed it in the past, like the show alone.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's hard for us to get out for 3 or 4 days at a time, let alone 3 or 4 months at a time.
I think they asked you to potentially commit to up to 6 months for that show. So far, I think the longest anyone lasted was in the 90s of days. So 3 months, give or take. But
Mm.
still, I mean, that's a pretty significant time frame to be away from home, away from friends and family, and that's kind of the title of that show alone. But when you're gone for that time, uh, you really have no connection to how your family's doing and stuff. And I don't know, what's the longest you've been pretty well without connection to friends or family?
Since I've been with Melissa, not very long, couple weeks maybe. Before I started dating Melissa, a couple months.
Yeah.
But I was
Uh,
very introverted. Like, don't get me wrong. In my teenage years, I was perfectly fine being 100% on my own and actually thrived in that kind of a situation. I went out of my way to be alone. But no, since I actually grew up a little and, decided I want a family and stuff, I don't think more than a couple weeks, honestly.
no. And I honestly don't know if I can even compete with that for time. The longest was for me when I joined reserves. So I really didn't have much more than maybe a call every couple of weeks home to my mother. I never got to talk to any of my friends, and I've rarely ever seen like news or anything. And that isolation, even there, started to get to me, and the people around me. We all seen it. I mean, we were with a group. We had people to talk to, but kind of isolated from your normal support group. It has a psychological effect on you. Isolated from really well anyone. That's pretty brutal. Like that's hard to deal with. I think I could. I think like yourself, I was a bit introverted, a bit of a loner growing up. So it didn't bother me not to be around people. But now that I have, a
You
bigger
don't
support group,
realize that once you start being a social person, you
yeah,
cannot really not be a social person anymore. It's fine if you're an introvert solo person and you don't need the social aspect with it then, but once you adopt the social aspect, it is
yeah,
really hard to step back into the solo field. Just a couple comments there. Gary was talking about the guy from Ontario that paddled from BC to Cape Breton. Longest portage was 30 days. He crossed Canada twice. And Kier said his pipe dream is snow hot tenting. So if we can get them over here with us, we can actually fulfill that dream for you. No worries. They say not much of a chance of that in the subtropics, but I mean, if you ever come this way, give us a call. We will make that dream happen for you, no problem. I'm
oh
pretty
yeah,
sure we can hook you up with a tent and a stove, and we'll knock that one out for you. But I realize there's a long travel in there. But for any reason, if you happen to land here, I 100% guarantee you we'll set you up.
yeah, yeah. Do plan it for the winter months here, though.
I was gonna say, if you land
Because
in the summer, we'll send you to the woods with a tent and a stove. But
it's not going to be the same. No, I mean, you could land here in late December, right up till sometime in February. You got a pretty good chance. But outside of those months, it gets iffy.
yeah,
It really does.
this year's
Um,
been a little thicker for snow, but in previous years, snow has been gone by March 1st. Cooler weather, but no snow.
yeah, our coldest 2 months are definitely January and February, and snow is iffy in this part of the province. But you can go. Yes, that's where I pass out.
Yeah, that's about where I am. If I ever get into temperatures between 35 and 40 degrees Celsius, and I realize it's probably a drier heat down there, not as high humidity, but in
That's where it is,
perspective,
buddy.
that's hot. Like 35
It,
degrees in the middle of the summer in Nova Scotia with a high humidex is about where we hit those degrees.
yeah. Well, I was in Texas a few years back for work, and they were hitting the 35, 40s, and people didn't go outside. Like as I'm walking around the place, and I mean, you as soon as you go out, you're sweating, and it just sort of drops your will to do much. But I noticed, like, you see people go from air conditioned houses to air conditioned cars to air conditioned malls and back, but
Yeah.
you never for a stroll in those temperatures. And in the evening came along, and people started coming out again because the humidity drops and the temperature drops, and it's livable again. But in the middle of the day, at the high heat, and I think, like, if you watch anything about, like, Mexico, they have, like, the afternoon siestas and stuff. Like, that's what that's about, right?
Oh, for sure. I was just rolling. I was reading the comics and laughing a little there. Hey, Christopher. The hottest I've ever been out in, it was with Humidex. It was 42 degrees, and we were working at a rifle range for natural resources. I'm not going to say where or who with because I don't really want to. It wasn't a bad experience. We just had to get the work done, and we were digging a ditch to put a culvert in because the chief firearms officer was set to inspect the range like in 3 days, and we were waiting for a break, and it just wasn't coming. So we're like, nope, screw it. We're doing this on, let's say, Thursday, and it happened just to be the hottest, most humid, most relentless day ever. And I ended up going to get some shale from our shale pit to try and put drainage in around this pipe, and I blew out a tire, and it was just a miserable experience. So no, at 40 degrees, old Roberto shuts down. And I've come to that conclusion ever since then.
Yeah, so he just said the 70% humidity. I mean, up here we often hit 70 and much higher.
Oh yeah, easy. It's odd for us to hit below 50% humidity. Like, that's when stuff's really drying out.
And that's why it's so cold here too. Like, the temperatures don't get super low, but the chill here can really cut. I think the hottest I ever hit, it would either have to be Winnipeg, and where one day I actually jumped into Assiniboine River, and anyone who knows the Assiniboine River knows that's not something
iffy.
That's pretty, yeah. But working on black soil in the sun, and I bet you we had to 100% humidity, and temperatures easily hit high 30s, low 40s. It was some of the most miserable conditions I was ever in, and I still, like, I can picture it now. At the end of my shift, I would put on my black leather jacket and jump on my motorcycle and drive home.
Oh,
but
man.
You just don't slow down.
No, you have to keep the air flowing. And I guess that was the hottest day I remember for digging. But a lot of the fires I was on in the summer, I mean, you're in that big black burn over. And obviously it's dry conditions or it wouldn't have burnt. And there's been some hot days for that too. But I guess the adrenaline and stuff and excitement's going through that. You don't think of it much. But
no, but you can definitely suffer from that.
40 and you're 100% humidity. That would be gross.
Of course, people stop functioning.
0 to 5 degrees Celsius. That's our happy temperatures right there.
That's good.
that's just where things are nice. I don't know if you ever checked out the rest of our YouTube videos, but we have a camping trip there, or our hammock setup video. That was the temperature range we were existing in, was 0 to 5 degrees. I think it actually went up to 7 or something like that. Yeah. But it was just nice. Like, that was beautiful. Yeah, no. At night it was definitely down around the 0 degree mark.
I don't think we quite hit 0, but it was hovering at it.
Oh, it was the waterfalls that was slower, wasn't it? Because that was early in the year and we had that mist hitting us.
So cold.
But
we did 2 nights. Was it 2 nights?
Yes. We did 2 nights on the waterfall. First night wasn't as bad. Second night was bad. And I think we did 2 nights for the other trip. Did we not? 3 technically, but one was in your camp, wasn't it? Or was it 2 and one was in your camp and one was... I can't remember now.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I think it's probably 2, one in the camp and one out. So we just went out, we cooked the turkey. I mean, any trip where you cook turkey is just awesome.
That was the best trip ever. I don't think I can go camping without turkeys now.
It's hard pulling that 20-pound tank, though.
Yeah, if it wasn't our setup, I probably wouldn't have done it. Anyway, we digress. If you want to see that adventure, definitely go check out the video. It's worth it. We had some fun.
But I think we covered it, but not as much as we could have. We both would love to see much more of the world. the list of environments we'd like to see are pretty well endless. And the types of things we'd like to. The coldest they've had down there was -8, and that was
I think it's
great.
-8 right now, and I got the window open.
Yeah, yeah. I don't even have a fire going. I attempted it, half-assed.
Attempted it. It might burn, it might not.
I threw some cardboard in there a little lighter and said it might light, and walked away from it because I had the podcast going and I wasn't going to pay attention to it. But no, yeah, I've been out in -20, 30. I may have been out in -40 before. I don't know if I've ever overnighted in -40, but that's not uncommon. Growing up, we had snowmobiles and we'd go out on the lake ice fishing and stuff. We often hit temperatures approaching those temperatures. And I can remember huddled up behind the snowmobile just to break the wind with the fishing line in the water. And Gary knows I cannot catch fish in the winter. That is my
I can't
weakness.
catch fish anywhere. You know that. All the pepperettes in the world can't help me catch fish. If any of you guys out there are friends with me on Facebook, if you look back through, you'll see one of my albums is called Extreme Cold Weather Camping. And it wasn't an overnight. I had Melissa with me. There was actually no snow, but with wind chill, it was like -38 or something like that. It was like a bitter cold snap we had. And that's probably the coldest in Nova Scotia. I've been out wandering through the woods doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with Gary. It's easier to camp in temperatures -20 than it is around 0 because you know what to expect and everything's frozen. It's easy to work with.
It's drier too. Once you get to those temperatures, humidity disappears again. And if you can keep the wind off you, you can actually oftentimes be working in a light jacket or taking your jacket off. I've often worked in a sweater, cutting wood and setting things up. And it's surprising how warm you can get in such cold temperature. As long as you keep the wind off you, and there's no real humidity at those temperatures. But when you get closer to the 0 mark, you get that humidity. You get everything that's damp. The snow is damp. The trees are damp. Everything seems to be more damp, and you get that freeze-thaw stuff going. And I think something we started saying early on is, the worst thing in the world is cold and wet.
Yeah, it definitely is.
You can be wet and hot. You can be cold and dry. Perfectly fine. You can be hot and dry. Perfectly fine. Cold and wet, that'll kill you. That's a dangerous combination. There's not much you can do with it, except try to get dry.
See, I'm not alone. There's other people that can't catch fish. And if you're wondering what the joke is, once again, watch our first camping adventure. Long story short, Ben and I tried to do primitive fishing. Ben was successful. I was not.
And you've tried so hard.
Oh, man, I was so hoping. I just wanted one fish. Like, I had actually stripped down, and this was early May, and crossed the river to try and get to a better spot. I was just like, no, I'm getting a fish. I did not.
And I'm sitting there like at our campfire pulling them out.
Yeah, literally. Like, you're just like tossing it. Oh, I got another one. I'm just like, what the hell, Ben?
I got 7 or 8, I think.
Yeah, you had quite a bit. We only kept 3 or 4, like actual good size. But you had a ton of them.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a video on the Facebook page. I was trying to catch some underwater video, and you can see Ben catching a fish. Anyway.
Yeah, it was a good trip. I'd love to do a fishing trip to Newfoundland. It would be an awesome trip for me and you to do if we ever had the opportunity. Go south of Red Indian Lake, between Burgeo and hit some of the spots back there. I mean, just huge fish and unlimited fishing, really, like opportunities. Not that you can catch unlimited fish. There is a limit.
Yeah.
But a lot of fun. But yeah, no, near and far, there's tons of places we'd love to visit. It's great, having people from around the world, literally all the way around the world. You couldn't get much further here talking to us about this type of topic. And if I would love to get down to Australia and camp, I think that would be one of my top 3. Yeah. So Gary, unlucky is not the word for that trip for me. We caught 0 fish and we lost a cell phone. I actually did a video for that, and I was so disgusted I never even edited it. And it's not Gary's fault. He did absolutely everything awesome.
Oh,
We
I
had
remember you telling me about that. I know what you're talking about now.
me and
Yes.
Gary set it up. I think things couldn't have gone much worse for me. We decided to go to. There's a shape to the lake, and there's like 3 or 4 lily lakes in Nova Scotia, by the way, because Nova Scotia cannot come up with unique names for anything. We just keep
No.
naming everything the same. And they were both in East Hants or Hants area, so we he's like, okay, I will, I may hold you to that. So I end up on the wrong lake and I call Gary and I'm like, where do you want to meet? And he's like, right off the road. And I'm like, there's nothing here. And he's like, you're at the wrong lake. And I'm like, shit. So I check it in 20 minutes away. I'm like, I'll be there in 20 minutes. So I show up. He's already out there. He's got like 4 holes already cut and stuff. And he's just working his way out trying to find a good spot.
He was living it up while you were trying to find it.
Right.
And just because I have it up and I'm not trying to cut your story in, just kind of giving an idea of where everybody's from. Like, this is what sparked the whole conversation, is we were just looking at where ignore the stuff on the right, that's just for us. But on the left, this is geographic location from where everybody's listening to us from. Once upon a time, United Kingdom was the highest, but the United States seems to have crept over that, followed by Canada, which is interesting to me because we're Canadian-based. I assumed we would be like that 61 percentile, but yeah, like we got United States, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, Belgium, Italy, Sweden, Ireland, Portugal, Poland, Netherlands, Austria, Japan, Denmark, Turkey, Finland, Brazil, New Zealand, South Africa. The list just goes on and on and on and on. Like,
South Africa, really?
Apparently.
That's awesome. There's another place I'd love to visit. I'd love to do South America. I'd love to do Africa. I'd love to do Australia. I would love to do New Zealand. These are all places.
Yeah, basically anything that's on this list, I would love
Turkey,
to visit.
Romania, Ukraine. Oh man, there's all kinds of cool places here.
Right? Like, it's just an awesome list.
I don't know.
So, we just...
I don't think there's a place there that I couldn't find something I would love to see.
Oh, for sure.
And most of them, multiple things for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, we need to set up a hosting program. Host Atlantic Canada Bushcraft Adventures for a day.
Queensland. Just touching on the Queensland thing there, I don't actually know where Queensland is in conjunction, but I was telling Ben before we started, somebody from my local fire department had actually gone over to help out with the wildfires that you guys were having in Australia. And he ended up somewhere on the southern... I'm going to say it's the southeastern shore? I don't know. The map he showed me was flipped upside down, and I couldn't get it all straight in my head. But anyway, apparently some really neat places over there. But I digress.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think we can wrap this up because honestly, I could go on talking about countries and places, and then I could start the Google searches, and next thing you know, it'll be next week.
And we're still talking. Like, we have a bad habit, if anybody hasn't noticed yet, that we can just keep going and going and going. And this is generally how our conversations go in the woods, too, if you're ever wondering. Like, we just talk non-stop.
Yes.
Which we're not complaining about. That's just how we are.
No. But we enjoy it, so it's all good. So yeah, I think it's a good topic. I mean, it's you won't necessarily learn a lot from this particular podcast.
And we don't profess to say that every one of our podcasts are informational either. Some of them are opinion-based, and that's what this one is. So,
but I really want people to think about it. Like, getting out and seeing something that's not necessarily in your comfort zone is an amazing thing, and the opportunities and things you can learn and see. I mean, just the people. If you got, besides the environment and the animals that I'd love to see, the opportunity to potentially camp with people from a different world, to have and it is basically a different world. The things they do and why they do it. Some of it you could bring back here and it would be very useful. Other things just won't work here because we don't have the right environment, right trees, right animals, whatever. But I mean, a lot of it is, I'm sure, transferable. And I've watched other bushcrafters over the years that have done like world trips and the things they've learned and stuff. And I try to incorporate some of it in when I can, but a lot of it is just like interesting to know. And it sits in the back of your head, hoping that someday you might have the opportunity to do something with it, right?
Prime example of that for me is I want to do stuff with the yucca plant. You see it in all of the like southern bushcrafting videos. Oh, you just go out and get your local yucca plant, and I'm like, we don't have yucca. We don't have anything that's even similar to yucca plants up here.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of really cool plants and stuff out there, and stuff that people talk about they can do, and yeah, we have a fairly diverse flora here, but it's what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
And the change is quite abrupt, even as you travel sometimes a short distance of what you can and can't do. We could have a whole conversation about that, and maybe that's a future one where we'll talk a bit about the fauna and types of things we see and use. But yeah,
There's
I think
a
we should
great
wrap.
quote right there. There's a quote for the ages. Specifics are geologically tied, but the attitude is universal. If that shouldn't be on a T-shirt, I don't know what should be.
I can make that happen.
I know. That's why I was saying it.
It's a junior died, but the attitude is universal. Yeah. Anyways, it was great talking to you guys. Is it Kier? Kier Faye? Pray?
Yeah,
I know you
what?
tried.
I've murdered his name so much now. I'm over it. Whatever I say, I know it's wrong, so I just... Hopefully they understand that's how I am. I expect some poisonous spider in the mail someday.
We need to get him on here talking to us one day so we can get him to pronounce it for us.
Yes, there. Perfect example. Somebody from Australia. Why don't you join us one of these times? And let's talk a little bit about the Australian outback and your experiences in bushcrafting. Because for us as Canadians, all we can do is dream. Good humor, at least.
Very good. I think my dog is the closest thing I've ever gotten to something from Australia.
I've got nothing. So
my when we got my dog Molly, the woman who gave her to us was from Tasmania, and I think she brought the mother over from Australia. So close enough, Ben.
See, that's the best you can hope for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess we've tried to wrap it up twice now, and I kept dragging us back in. So this time, I'll let you finish it off, Ben, and I'll just sit here and look pretty.
Thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll hear and see you all next time. I'm sure this conversation isn't really over between me and Rob, but we'll let you guys go, and we'll talk to you later.
Have a good night, everyone.